advantages it gives to us over Photoshop are two things. One, PBR shading, which probably most of you know. That is physically based renders, the kind of materials and shaders that we get in any rendering system like V-Ray or Arnold, or even there are quite a few render systems nowadays, so which are giving us options for physically based renders. Another thing that is that uh, uh, Substance Painter provides us over Photoshop is multi-UV texturing, or UDIM. UDIM is a short form for U dimensions. So multiple UV texturing, or UDIMs. So these are the two things specifically that Substance Painter gives us an advantage or an edge over Photoshop. So these are the two very important things that we'll be using time and again while working with Substance Painter. And as a result of UDIM and PBR, the textures that Substance Painter can create, or the kind of shading and texturing effect that Substance Painter can create, are like miles above or beyond what Photoshop could have done. It doesn't mean that texturing is Photoshop is passive. It's not that. Photoshop texturing is still done. For example, if you want to do something very, a kind of stylized textures, if you want to create, Photoshop is still good. But if you want to create a really high-res textures with very realistic results, then you have to come to Substance Painter. There is no other way. So in today's time, if a person wants to become a texturing artist or a modeling and texturing artist, this is a must, like a go-to software. You cannot do without Substance Painter if you want to become a modeling and texturing artist today. So let's have a look at the overall interface. How I think the interface is visible to everyone. So like initially we have the normal kind of menus that we have in any other software, like the file menu, where we can bring in like any kind of new object that you want. Now what you actually do is you take something like you model an object in Maya or 3ds Max, whichever software you're using, or even Blender. Now what you have to do is you have to export that object after unwrapping. There are a couple of things about unwrapping I'll discuss, but before that, we'll just see that like you have to export this object. Simple export. You can export it like as OBJ or as FBX. Both can do. Both will work. So, for example, I take it over here. I export the object as OBJ. Come to Substance Painter, File, New Project. Now here you can take the the template of the project. You can decide. Normally we don't need to make much changes as of now. So we'll straight away we'll go to the File menu option, select, and we'll just go over here, take the file. Now you can change the document resolution over here, but it is not necessary. Just leave it as it is. If it's by default 512 or 1024, because if you keep on increasing the resolution, your file may turn a little heavy. So I'll suggest keep the document resolution at 1024 or 512, whichever suits your need. Don't need to make any other changes as of now, and just okay it, and your object it will be there on the viewport. Now the viewport navigation is simple, just like Maya. Alt and left mouse button. You can go around. You can tumble around the viewport. You can see the object from different angles, and Alt and right mouse for zooming in and out. So the basic Maya commands are working over here. So you can see the object is visible in like the 3D view. You can see over here. To the right, however, you have the UV view, where you can actually see the object, the 3D object in a UV layout view. You've got multiple windows over here. You've got the properties, the paint properties. You've got the shader settings. Right now I'm turning them off. You've got the layers window, the texture set settings. All of these windows are extremely important, and the texture settings. Now, one thing that is very important for Substance Painter to work is you need at least a 4 GB graphics card. 2 GB graphics card probably won't do, and it won't work without a graphics card. 4 GB graphics card minimum is required for working with Substance Painter, because it otherwise you won't be getting any kind of real-time PBR previews. So this is the basic, like how we can import an object in a Substance Painter. There are a couple of options. I'll go back to the file menu and we'll see how actually to import it. There are a couple of things that we need to keep in mind. Overall, this is the basic stuff. There are a couple of tool settings over here. You've got physical paint. So if you want to paint anything, the default option, paint over here. If you want to paint, we can, we have got a physical paint over here. It does great things, as we'll see in the later sections of the class. If you want to erase something, if you have painted something and you want to erase it, you have got the eraser options. You have got projection painting. We'll come to these options in the later part of the sessions. Today we'll be mostly covering the interface and the basic settings. We have got if we want to apply a material, or if we want to apply paint or something, or if we want to mask by polygons and stuff, we can do that by using the polygon fill options. If we have painted something, and if we want to smudge that, just like Photoshop, somewhat like Photoshop, we can smudge the paints over here. We have got a cloning option that we rarely use. We don't use much of a cloning here. So if I want to clone something, I can clone that part just like Photoshop, and we'll be discussing the commands shortly. So these are the basic tool options. We also can, like if I'm texturing something over here and I want to take that texture, like I want to take it back to Photoshop, it can be done. Like there's a button over here that can export the texture to Photoshop, do some changes over there, and if you want to bring it back to Substance Painter, you can do that. So these are the basic, the tool menu over here. You've got the edit options. So if you want to do any kind of undo, redo, so undo is basically with Control Z, and redo with Control Y you can do. If you want to change the project configuration, so basically if I have made some changes in my texturing, and later on I have made some changes in the UV, and I want to bring I want to maintain my textures but still change the UV, so that can be done by using the project configuration. Again, we'll be covering these things in more details in the either today in the later sections of the session or tomorrow. We've got the bake mesh maps. So if this will be using for texture baking, the most vital part, and the first point that we have to cover in Substance Painter, that will be the bake mesh maps. Settings, if you want to make any change in settings with Substance Painter, you can do over here. We usually leave it as default settings. We don't make much changes over here. There are two modes. Right now, as you can see, the painting mode that is active. That is just by pressing F9, you can activate it. If you want to see the render mode, so you can do that by pressing F10, or just by selecting the rendering options from here. So you have an iRay engine from where you can basically do a real-time rendering in Substance Painter. We can change the background and stuff. We'll do that shortly. We'll see where from we can make those changes. So these were the basic like the painting and rendering options. Then we've got the different windows. The most important windows that we'll be needing over here are the display settings. First of all, that will ensure, like, if you want to make any changes in your environment maps or so. As of now, you cannot see the environment in the background over here. I've kept it off as of now. But if you want to see the environment in the background, you can turn it up. You can turn up the environment opacity, and you can turn down the environment blur. So I can see the environment. I can turn off the environment blur to make the environment visible over here. This, however, is not actually required while working. So usually we keep it either blurred or like we turn off the environment opacity altogether. You can change the environment map. That is the HDRI you can change. You've been given different HDRIs over here. So if you want to change, you can make the changes over here. So different environment maps we got over here. So like if you want to like experiment with these kind of stuffs, we can do. Normally it's not required. We just leave it to the default settings. Environment exposure. So if you want to change the exposure of the viewport, you can do that from here. If you want to turn on the shadows, you can turn on shadows. And there are the computational mode, like you have got intensive for very accurate shadows, average kind of low end kind of shadows if you got, and lightweight for the basic kind of shadows. So we can turn on the shadows. However, just as I told you, this is not required. We are not exactly lighting and shading over here. We are just doing the texturing bit. So this is not required, just as I said. The next thing that we got over here are the camera settings. So some of the camera settings are required for like if you want to show any kind of bloom effects, or if you want to make any changes in your camera settings like field of view and stuff. If you want to change the perspective settings, you can do those from here. Again, not that much necessary. Just they're part of the interface, so it's better to know that it's there. You can turn up some post effects, like if I want to change some like glare settings and stuffs, so I can do that from here. So or if I want to do some vignette settings, those things can be done from the post effects option. Like I'm doing the vignette settings over here, or if I want to turn up the glare or something. Right now there is nothing that is giving us glare, but you can see a bit of it. You can see how the glare settings work. If you want to do some kind of lens distortion stuffs or anti-aliasing stuffs on the viewport, if you want, you can do that. Again, you can see the edges become smoother and all. But remember, all these settings, they are basically pretty. They will come heavy on your while working. It may make your files heavy. So right now, we'll keep these off. We also have the subsurface scattering. So later on, if you're using something like for triple S settings or subsurface scattering settings, if you want to do something, you can turn it on from here. If you want to activate the color profile, if you want to work with any particular color profile, so that can again be done. But again, just as I told you, the text, as far as texturing is concerned, we don't need these settings that much. A few settings, however, that will be important are the glare settings and the subsurface scattering. These are sometimes for some preview things we may need. Otherwise, these settings are usually to be kept off. One thing that is sometimes required is the mesh wireframe. If you can turn it on. So if you want to see the wireframes, the object with wireframe on the viewport, so for that you have to come to the display settings and turn on the show mesh wireframe. You can you can change the color if you want of the view of the wireframes. That can be done from here. The wireframe opacity, like how much of the wireframe you want to keep it visible, that again you can play with the wireframe opacity. So these are the basic display settings that we saw. And the next, okay, one thing, just remember when you're working with Substance Painter, something that is very important is since it's it gives you real-time previews, so it will keep on making cache memories. So you need to have some amount of storage in your hard disks. So just make sure that wherever you're storing your file and wherever you have chosen your cache files to be stored, so that there should be enough space for that. Then we have the history and the history settings. Not much required over here. We are nothing to do with the history settings. Then we have got the layers. Just like Photoshop, we have got the layers over here. So you can add different type of layers. Now, primarily we have two type of layers in Photoshop in Substance Painter. The default one is a fill layer. So we can just delete it as of now. So there are no layers. I can add different type of layers, just like I've added a fill layer over here. Now, the way to work around with this is I have added a fill layer. Now, I can edit the properties of the layer. Where do I get the properties from is, just keep this selected, go to Windows, Views, and Properties Fill. So from here, what I can do is I can edit the properties of the fill layer. So I've got this layer selected. I've got this fill layer selected over here. And these are the properties of the layer that we can see over here. So if I want to make any changes, so for example, I want to change the color of the layer. So I've got the base color option, and I can take the color of my choice from here. So I can change the color of the layer directly from the properties option. If I want to make any changes in the roughness settings, roughness is basically you want your the reflective properties of your object to be blurry reflections you want, or you want accurate reflections, so that you can play around with the roughness settings. So if I keep the roughness settings off, there will be very clear and sharp reflections, as you can see over here. And if I turn up the roughness settings, so if I just take it towards the white, so you'll see the roughness, the object becoming more and more like with blurry reflections, and all the reflections start getting blurred. So if you want more of a matte kind of look, so you will keep the roughness high. However, if you want to keep it more like kind of glossy surface, so you will keep the roughness amount low. Now, if you want your object to have a more metallic kind of look, you can turn up the metallic amount. So this amount will be either be 1 or 0. So there is nothing called semi-metallic stuff. It's either full metallic or it's non-metallic. So if you want it to be metallic, you keep it at 1. If you want it non-metallic, plasticky, or if you want to keep kind of a ceramic kind of look, something with Fresnel reflections and all, so in that case you will turn it down to 0. If you want metallic or normal reflections, you will turn it up. If you want it like glossy reflections, plastic kind of reflections, Fresnel reflections, you will keep it 0. You've got some other properties over here. We'll come back again to the properties section, but before that, we'll see what other windows we got over here. So we got the shader settings. Now we go to shader settings for like any changes in the shader that we have selected. Like these are the various shaders. Now don't get confused here. Over here, these shaders are not like Blinn or Fong or like that. We have got some preset shaders, and we don't make much changes over here. We don't need to change most of the shader settings, but just one thing, if we need to make something with opacity maps and all, in that case you will need this particular shader, that is the PBR metal rough with alpha. So this is the shader that you will be needing if you want to do something with alpha blending. If you want to have your if you want to do something with like with opacity maps and all, then you will be needing the shader with alpha blending. Otherwise, any of the normal the default shader is good enough. You can work with the PBR metal rough or PBR metal rough with. The next thing that we'll be seeing is the shelf. So the shelf is the place where you have got lots of procedural textures and smart materials that have been provided. So we have got multiple alphas that we can use for our brushes. We have got different grunge maps. that again you can use both for your procedural texturing as well as for your brush settings. Procedural maps, textures, some of the textures that have been provided. You can import your own textures also. If you have created something in Photoshop or there's a photograph that you want to import, you can import. We'll see how to do those as well. Some hard surfaces, these are some like preset normal maps that have been provided. Some skin textures. These are basically some scanned skin textures that are also provided over here. You can use those for your, like photorealistic skin textures. If you want to do, you can do. Uh, there are some filters, just like Photoshop filters. We have some filters, some brushes. Like you can take a pic of the kind of brush that you want to use. So again, if you want to take a brush, take a pic from here, and you can start painting with the brush directly on the viewport. Got some particles. So if you want to use some particle paints, like if I take a physical paint and if I take a broken glass option, I just draw it, and you can create some kind of simulative effects on the viewport. So if I want to create a kind of burn effect, so that can again be done depending on the type of color that we are selecting. So these are some of the basic like interface kind of stuff that we can see. Some tools, again, like if you want to use the stitches, if you want to add stitches to your object, so that can again be done. You can add some 3D stitches and stuff. You can see the results are not exactly great as of now because I am keeping the things very basic. We'll see how to get some great results as we get into the details. I've got some materials, like you can just simple drag and dot and get some fantastic materials, as you can see on the viewport. Now, one thing about Substance Painter is there are lots of windows that you have. So have to be a little careful with the management of the windows. Like any kind of material that we can call in. You want something like, plasticky, or you want something like grass. So see, these are some of the materials that are provided. You can create your own materials as well, which are great. You've got some smart materials, some preset smart materials that have been provided again. So we'll just see how the smart materials, the preset materials look. So for example, I take a still painted option and I apply it. So you see it's creating a material which is already following the kind of which is already kind of edged kind of materials. If I want to create some damaged kind of looks, they are already there. If I want to create something like wooden materials and stuffs. So again, these are the preset materials that you are getting. You've got some smart masks. So we'll cover the masks as when we'll be covering the layers in depth. And you have the environment options that we have seen just a little while back. So that's what mostly shelf is all about. You can pick your brushes or your masks or your materials, everything from the shelf. You also got the texture set list. Now, this is something that we'll be seeing what the texture set list is, as we'll re-import an object from Maya and we'll see what a texture set list is all about. We've also got the texture set settings. Now, this is again very important as we import something into Substance Painter and we bake the textures and get the ambient occlusion maps and stuff. So this is where it will get interesting. So that was basically the kind of interface that we'll be seeing mostly in while working with Substance Painter. We also got some viewport options over here. So the first thing, that this is for pause engine computation. So if you just pause it, it won't be giving you any real-time preview. So we'll always keep it on. We have got the 3D, 2D option. So if you just want to see both the 3D and 2D view, you can keep it on from here, extreme right corner of the viewport. If you want to see the 3D only view, so you can keep it on from, you can change it to that. Or if you want the 2D view, you can do that as well. Normally, it's preferable to work with the 3D, 2D options. If you want to work in the perspective view, or if you want the orthographic views, that can be selected from over here. If you want to like go to the rendering option directly, you can go directly from here as well. So that was the basic interface. So I'll just close this view and go back to our basic of Substance Painter. We can see the basic interface. Now, the first thing that we are going to see today is, like, when I am importing something into Substance Painter, there are a couple of options that come across, and we need to understand that while importing, if we choose the wrong option, then maybe later on some things won't actually work. So, for example, if I want my textures, like if I am using a workflow where I want a like I'm going to use both Substance Painter as well as Photoshop. So your workflow needs to be planned in that manner. So for example, I'm working with Substance Painter, do some textures over here, create some textures, nice textures I've created. And now I want to take those textures back to Photoshop and do some edits in Photoshop. That won't be possible if you turn on, like I go to new project and turn on the use UV tile workflow. If I turn this on, and then if I import my OBJs or FBXs into the viewport, I won't be able to take my Substance Painter texture to Photoshop and edit that over there. So if I want to have a Substance Painter and Photoshop workflow, combined workflow, this option needs to be turned off. But if I want to work with the UDIM workflow, this option needs to be turned on. Now, what is UDIM and how to work with it? I'm coming to that. But before that, just keep this thing in mind. If I want to have a Substance Painter and Photoshop combined workflow, this needs to be turned off. If I want to use a UDIM workflow, this needs to be turned off. And maybe I've already guessed, UDIM won't work with Photoshop. If you are using an UDIM workflow, it will not work with Photoshop. Photoshop doesn't support UDIM texturing, UDIM tiling. So as of now, I'm just keeping it off, used UV workflow off, select something, and maybe whatever, just bringing this. So I've got this stuff over here, this gun. And now I want to make a texture or something. Just go to shelf, take a smart material, just as is applied over here. And now if I want to take it back to Photoshop and continue over there, I can do that. So I'll just go over here, select my layer, and click on this button. So it will take all the layers as well as all the maps directly to Photoshop. So you can see it's exporting everything to Photoshop. Brings it over here in and converts it to Photoshop layers. Is that it has got everything, including normal maps and stuff, whatever is part of the material. It brings everything over here. So all the textures, all the materials and stuffs, everything is over here. So if you want to make any changes in these textures, if you want to edit the textures over here, you can do that. So just keep this thing in mind while working with Substance Painter. This needs to be decided at the very initial stage. If you have not, if you have selected the wrong option while importing, so if I just, turn on the use UV tile workflow and bring it in, apply something, whatever, and I want to export this, it will give an error message saying the map export is not available when using the UV tile workflow. So just remember this. If you are intent on using both Photoshop and Substance Painter, you are not supposed to take the UV workflow. But however, uh, if you are not using this UV tile workflow, you are actually missing out on the most important or the most interesting bit of Substance Painter. So we are going to do exactly, this is the workflow that we are going to follow mostly. The first part just I said, so that if somebody wants to mix Substance and PS, you can do that. Otherwise, that is not needed. As of now, in the current time, we are going to use this particular workflow. We're going to use the UV tile workflow and take the preserve UV tile layout per material and enable painting across tiles. This is extremely important. Now, for Substance Painter enables us to paint across tiles. Now, here are two options will be there. Convert UV tiles into individual texture sets as legacy and preserve UV layouts per material. So to understand this thing, when to use which one, we will go back, we'll take a step back and we'll go back to Maya. So you see, in Maya, we have created this particular like sofa object, and we can see the UV editor. This is already textured. So I'll just assign a new material. Go to the UV editor settings and see all the UVs are already split and set properly. And they are basically occupying one single UV tile, that is 0:1. Now, previously, when we were using Photoshop, we used to texture in Photoshop and all. This was the normal workflow. You you make an object in Maya, start unwrapping, unwrap the objects, and bring everything under within this 0:1 box. This used to be the workflow. Nowadays, while working with any advanced texturing tool like be it Substance Painter or be it Mari, this is not what we do. What we actually do is we'll split this stuff. We'll split this entire like object or the UV shells into different tiles. Now, how we are going to do that? It can be done automatically just by using one single option. Go to modify, layout. Make sure the method is in unfold 3D and not legacy. Legacy is the old system. We'll not go for that. We'll go for unfold 3D option. So, okay, make sure the unfold 3D is selected over here, and go down layout settings. At layout settings, you have got the shell distribution options. Keep it to distribute, and tiles. Select the number of tiles from here. So I'm just selecting maybe 3 by 3. 3 tiles in U direction, 3 tiles in V directions, and apply. The moment I do that, the UV shells are now spread across 9 different tiles. As you can see, there are 9 different tiles in this what do you call is the UV editor. So this is 1. This is the first, the 0:1 box. Then it has been spread to the next one, that is 1002, and also see the names. UV U1V1 1001, 1002, 1003, 1013, 1012, 1011. So these names have also been provided. So now instead of one single tile, the UV shells have been split into multiple different tiles. What's the advantage of doing that? The advantage is each tile can now be separated, can now be textured separately, and each tile can be given a particular resolution, for example, texture resolution. For example, uh, uh, each tile, for example, I can give 1K, 2K, or 4K or 8K textures, whichever I deem reasonable. So whatever is required for my project. So if this part is getting 1K texture, same 1K texture is being provided or is being given to the 1002 set. Same is being given to this and so on. So if it works like that, so you can understand that previously, whereas if I go back, take a step back. So if I take, for example, a 4K texture out of this also, a 4K resolution texture if I create, so this part is getting maybe a little lesser than 1K. This is getting lesser than 1K. These are getting very less resolution textures. When I split it into multiple UV tiles, so each part can be given much textures with much higher resolution. So that is where multi-UV texturing or UDIM becomes necessary. I hope this part is getting clear to everyone. If anyone has any confusion with UDIM texturing, please ask now. Hope UDIM is clear to everyone. And how we can actually split this into different UDIMs. Because if you are not using UDIM, unless until you have got a very specific reason of not using UDIM, there are some reasons where there are some cases where you won't be using UDIM. If you are creating some asset for AR and VR or something like that, then you probably won't be using the UDIM. But if you are creating an asset for a AAA game, or if you're making an asset for a movie or a VFX movie, so in that case you should definitely use the UDIM workflow. So for example, I've got this game character over here, and when I open the UV editor, you see I have split all these UV shells and placed them in such a manner so that each part which should get high res texture or which is a lead asset in a way, each part is getting equally high res textures from or equally high res textures can be given to each part. So for the head, if I'm doing a 4K texture or if I'm doing a 2K texture, the head itself is getting the maximum part of the 2K texture. The gun, the gun itself is getting only 2K texture. The trousers are getting 2K texture again. The shirts are getting 2K textures again. So these have been manually done. This cannot be done, just by using layout. So this has been done manually, and also by using by maintaining the what do you call this the texture resolution. So basically we have maintained the texel density. Make sure you are maintaining the proper texel density and you are splitting your UV shells correctly into the into different number of UV tiles. Another advantage is you can, once I have done that, I don't need to take part by part object to Substance Painter. I can take the whole thing to Substance Painter all at once. So we have this one over here. So you see, now what has happened is the option that I chose over here was convert UV tiles into individual texture sets legacy. Now, as a result, what is happening is, as I go to the window texture set list, it has created these different uh, tiles or different sets as per our like our UV tiles, like the way the UV tiles were named in Maya, like we saw that 1001, 1002, and so on. That was the way of naming. And similarly, it has created this, a Substance Painter has created these texture sets and named the uh, texture sets accordingly, and I can access them individually. So one by one part by one part, or one texture set by one texture set, I can texture. That's okay. And that was the way things used to be worked previously. But nowadays, Substance Painter has given us a better option. The option being, we don't need to do it in this way. What we'll do is, instead of keeping it at convert UV tiles into individual texture set, we'll just take preserve UV tile layout per material and enable painting across tiles. This is the option that we have to use. So I'll just select it and okay. Now what this gives us is, we can now access all the UV tiles at the same time, and we can paint across the UV tiles. So if I go to my layers and take a new brush or something and change the properties. So whatever brush I have taken, if I want to change the properties of the brush, I need to go to the properties option and make changes. Now if I make any change over here, you can see it'll work across the tiles. It's basically working across the tiles, as you can see. It will just, extra areas will be diffused. And select the high poly mesh from here. So high definition mesh. Now, if the question can arise, if we don't have a high poly mesh, sometimes we don't, we just work on the low poly itself. In that case, you will just use the low poly as the high poly. If you don't have a high poly mesh, if you don't have any normal or normal map or ambient occlusion map from any high poly map to bake into, so what you will do is you just use the low poly as the high poly mesh. But make sure you are doing this step. Without doing this step, don't go ahead, because otherwise the procedural maps and nothing is going to work as you want. Substance Painter applies all the procedural materials or smart materials or the whatever generators and stuffs that are there. They all work based on these data, on the baking data. If you don't bake your texture at the onset, your Substance Painter won't be getting the result that you actually desire. So the first step that you do is, once you have called in the low poly mesh or the main mesh that you have called into the viewport, once you have done that, go and use the bake mesh maps. Bake mesh maps, output size, keep it to the maximum resolution that you want to. Take the high mesh as of now. So I have got the box high mesh. If you are working, just as I told you, if there is no high mesh, use the low poly as the high poly. I'm taking the high definition mesh here. We don't need any cage or cage file, etc. It's there. We don't need it. And there are a couple of other options, like the frontal distance. Now this, you may need a bit of trial and error. Sometimes, like if I do by default, if I just keep it like this and click bake selected textures. So it's baking. It's taking a slight time because I've kept it 2K. So you can understand for a 4K texture with a complicated mesh, it will take time. You have to give the time. If it's a complicated, detailed, very detailed mesh and you want a very good output, you have to give time. It can take like 3-4 hours also for a proper baking. Now I have baked it, but the result is not up to what I actually want. So in this case, what I need to do is I need to bake the mesh map with by making some changes. So what I'll do is I'll increase the frontal distance and the rear distance slightly. So this is a bit of trial and error. You can try out different values, keeping it somewhere around 0.4 or 0.5 or something like that. And again, this is not absolutely necessary. In many cases, with very complicated meshes also, you won't be needing to do that. But in cases, sometimes you need to do this, sometimes you don't need to. It's a trial and error stuff. Now, if I'm keeping the output size small as of now, I'm just keeping it 512 because this is not the, this is just a kind of demo that we are doing to understand the tools. The next thing that you should do is anti-aliasing. You should use some amount of subsampling, maybe 2x2 or 4x4. 8x8 will give you excellent quality, but will take up a lot of time. So I'm keeping it at subsampling 2x2. Match by mesh name. This is something that is required, but not now. This will be seeing tomorrow when we will be using the ID maps. Now, what are the maps that is going to bake? It will bake a normal map. So the normal map is basically the tangent normal map. A world space normal it will also bake. An ID map it will bake. It will bake the ambient occlusion map, the curvature map, position map, and thickness map. Now all these maps are important. Some of these maps we already know. Ambient occlusion, we can guess what ambient occlusion map will do. Curvature map is a map which will basically bake all the the curvature details of the surface, and it will use that detail to use edgeware kind of effect. Position map will basically take down all the entire data of the surface. Thickness map is something that is used for generating subsurface scattering kind of results. ID map is something that is used for selecting and applying materials. So we'll see that these things shortly. So as of now, I've taken these options. So what are the things that I've selected? I've taken high definition mesh. That is, I've browsed to my high poly mesh over here. I've changed the this frontal and rear distance slightly, and I have used a little bit of anti-aliasing. Bake selected texture. Now you see it's taking lesser time because I've reduced the texture resolution. But mind you, when you are doing for a particular project, you should take a little higher resolution, at least 2K or 4K, you should definitely go for. So now it's giving me a much better result. So it has generated the normal maps. It has generated the world space, normal. It has generated ID, ambient occlusion, etc., etc. All the maps it has generated. And if you want to see these maps individually, the results, you can go over here, single channel, and you can check over here the base color, which right now there is no base color. Height, no height definitions as of now. Roughness, nothing there. Metallic, nothing there because we have not applied anything. Normal maps and normal plus height plus mesh. This is where you can see the baked output that it has created. The mesh maps, you can see over here, the curvature maps, ambient occlusion maps. You can see the maps that have been baked. So the maps that have been baked, they're basically the mesh maps, the normal maps, ID maps. I have not used any ID, so it's showing gray, ambient occlusions, and so on. So these maps I can check over here also. If I want to see the material view, keep it at the material view. Now, right now, you see within the texture set settings, you have the first option that you're seeing over here is the texture size that is visible over here. Now, here you can make changes. Even if I have texture, I've baked the textures in 4K or 2K or whatever, and while working, I want to keep a much lighter file. So from here, I can bring it down. I can take it, suppose 512 or 256. So it's giving me, you can see I'm seeing as of now, the preview is of a much lesser resolution. Even if I can go to 128, it's giving me a much lesser resolution feedback over here. But it doesn't mean that the texture resolution that's being used, that has gone down. It's not. The texture resolution, when you are going to finally export the maps, you are going to get the actual texture resolution. But while working to keep your file size low, you and to keep things, light, you can reduce the size from here. So you just go to the texture size from here, and you like texture set settings, and reduce the size, keep it to suppose 128 or 256 or something like that. So we'll keep the texture size low over here. Now, what are the channels that are available, and what are these channels all about? The channels, what we are seeing over here are the properties that we will be able to access as of now. So if I go to Windows and bring the layers, select this layer or add a fill layer. A fill layer is basically, it's a layer with color which is being applied all over. I take the properties, and over here you can see the properties, the material properties that I'm getting over here. Now these material properties are exactly the channels that are available over here. So these are the properties that I can access as of now. So I got base color, that is color, height informations, roughness, metal, normals, opacity, and emissive. These are the properties that I got over here. If I want something else, I can add more properties from the channels. So I can add more channels. So if I want something like maybe reflection, so the moment I add it, it will start showing up in the material section. If this is not active yet, so you won't be getting the properties here. But if I turn it on, if I click on it, I'll be getting the reflection properties within the options. If I turn it off, so it will go off. So if for example, if I want to a layer with only color informations, I don't need the other ones, so I can just turn them off. So I can take a base color, and I just am working with the base color only. So I've turned up the base color. This is I've added a red color or a green color or something. Whatever color I've chosen, it's showing over here. At the same time, you can also see it is showing me the ambient occlusion properties as well. So the context shadows and the normal map details, everything is visible over here. So I've got a color applied and no other property. Now I may add a different fill layer where I want to work with the other properties. Maybe I want to work with the metallic properties or the roughness properties. So this one, so you see over here right now it's showing me the color, the base color. I turn off color, the color is no more visible. But what are the properties available over here? We have got roughness and metallic. If I turn down the metallic, the roughness property, so you can see now this box is reflecting the environment. It's become a glossy object. If I turn on metallic right now to full, so it is giving me a completely reflective property based on the options that I have chosen. So the roughness and metalness we have adjusted over here. So you can see this is right now absolutely a very glossy, very shiny metallic stuff. If I want a sort of blurred reflection, just as I discussed earlier, I can turn up the roughness a little bit. So this way we can create more, some kind of realistic looking metal and stuff without doing much of a stuff. And all these are non-destructive. So if I want to change the color, I can go and change the color anytime and, make whatever kind of edits I want. Those can be done. So basically the channels and stuffs. I hope this has been clear. So now let's take something else, and I'll take a different example, a proper one now. So let's take this. Okay, one thing I should mention over here while exporting for Substance Painter, and make sure you're doing this. Uh, Make sure that all your objects are, first of all, the ones you want to combine them and apply a single material to all of them. Don't keep separate materials. Many times what we do is like we apply a separate material to this one. Maybe this has got a separate Lambert, this has a separate Blinn, and so on. And we then export it. And when we are importing that to Substance Painter, it will definitely create different texture sets. So if you want this all the texture sets to be together, all the UV tiles to appear together, what is necessary is all the objects should have the same material applied to them, to make sure all the objects have a single material applied to them. Because when you open them in UV texture set settings, texture set list, when you open it, it creates the texture sets based on the initial shading group. If you have 2 or 3 different materials applied, what it will do is it will create different shading groups. So it will create one for the Lambert, one for Blinn, one for Fawn, and so on. And you won't be able to access all the UV tiles at the same time. So make sure that you have only one single material applied while exporting it as OBJ or exporting it as FBX. Whatever you're doing, one single material, one single Maya material should be, Maya or Max material should be applied to the object that you're exporting. So when if I don't do that, let's for example, let's take a case where I have not done that. So these have Blinn applied. So Lambert over here, this is Blinn. I export this. My option over here is clear, preserve UV tile. I've done that. Now when I do that, see the problem that I'll face is I'm not getting all the UV tiles at the same time. So one set has gone to, I standard, and one for Blinn. So I have to texture them separately. So don't make this mistake. Make sure all the materials have, all the objects that you're exporting have the same material applied to them. I hope this is clear. This is again very important. So now let me apply one single material to apply to all of them. And I'll be using the UV tiles. So this one, I'll just split as of now into different tiles. So I've taken 5 by 2 over here. It can be Now, one thing I should mention, it doesn't, since we have the UV tiling option, it doesn't mean you will take 50 tiles. No, don't do that. Maybe 5 or 3 or 5, that should be, less, 5, 10 tiles are okay. You go beyond that and you're working with too much data. So that can again slow down your texturing system. So I have done that. Now I'll import it over here. Well, I didn't export. So I'll just export selection. So this time, all the UV tiles that I have split into, all are coming and within one material, uh, uh, within one material group, within one texture set. So if you have different materials applied, it will create different texture sets, which will be a problem for at the time of texturing. You won't be able to access all at the same time. So this is again very important. So once I've done that, now I need to bake it. I already have a high detail mesh for this. I actually did that in ZBrush. So I'll show the ZBrush data over here. It can be done anywhere. You can use Substance Painter, or you can use even Maya. If you're using something in Maya, you can do that. I'll just show it once so that you know what kind of data we can get from here. So this is the same stuff. This is the same sofa that I have sculpted in a ZBrush. I've done these wrinkles and all these marks and stuffs. Now what I need to do is I need to take all these details. I need to bake all. So what I did was I exported the entire high poly mesh as an OBJ, and we are going to bake it from there. So bake mesh maps. So for high, I should use some anti-aliasing and some amount of I should increase the output size, but I'm not doing that now because it will take up some time and we don't want to lose time in that way. Now bake the selected textures. This is going very fast, as you can see, because I have not chosen very high quality, high resolution, and I have not chosen any anti-aliasing or stuff like that. Cool. So as you can see, it has baked it. The quality is not great because, just as I told you, I have not given it the highest resolution and anti-aliasing. As you do that, if you give highest quality and anti-aliasing, these results will be much better. As of now, these are a sort of kind of pixelated, but for our demo purpose, it's okay. For the demo purpose, it's good enough. As we go over here, let me take the layers. Now, let me apply a simple fill layer. Now, it already has a fill layer applied, as you can see, but we can delete it and we can create our own new fill layer. Add a fill layer. To access the properties of the layer, what we have to do is we have to go to the properties section, the Windows properties fill. You can add it here. So Windows properties fill, and we can change the color as we have already seen. Change the color, make any changes that you want to do over here. So it's looking decent. Now, what if I want to paint something directly? Now, I cannot paint directly on a fill layer. There is an option, but we'll see that later. If I want to paint something, if I want to use my brushes, as of now, you can see the brush option is dead. It's inactive. You're not seeing the brush option as of now. So to make the brush option active, what we need is, there are two types of layer over here. One is a fill layer and the other is a paint layer. If I add a paint layer, that is when our paint options become active. So I've taken a paint layer, go to the paint properties. Now the properties will be showing the paint properties. I go to paint properties, take any color or something, and I can start coloring with a basic brush. There are options within the brush. If you want to paint, symmetrical texturing, if you want to do, you can do that. There's a symmetry option. If you select the brush, within the brush option, you have got options. Just like Photoshop, you have all the options over here. So if I turn on the symmetry now, just a different color you'll be able to see it better. So if I turn on the symmetry, you can see this red line. So this is basically for the symmetry, it's the mirror. So you can color both ways. You can color on both sides. It's always advisable when you're using, like if you want to paint, you should use a pen tablet or something. Mouse is not advisable. So if I want to make any kind of textures and stuffs, so I can, directly paint it over here by using the paintbrush options. Now, if I want to use some different brush settings, what do I have to go? I have to go to the shelf. So I can go to the shelf and I've got brushes here. I can pick any brush that I want. So a brush is basically a normal brush with a specific alpha added. So I can take my own alpha as well to show that how we can take our own alpha. You can change the brush size from here, or you can use the bracket options. So you can just use the second bracket, the third bracket, second bracket options you can use to increase the size and so on. You can control the flow from here, and you can turn on the pen pressure options from here. If you turn them on, your pen pressure will become activated. So you can see now we are working with the pen pressure and stuffs. You can control the spacing, the brush spacings you can control from here. So if I increase the spacing, just like Photoshop, you don't need to, these are not rocket science. These are absolutely simple Photoshop fundamentals. So you can do that from here. If you want distance, so basically you can just like, kind of the Photoshop smoothness brush, you can use the distance as well. So gives more control with the brush. You can change the position of the symmetry if you want. Just turn on the symmetry. Beside the symmetry, you have got this option. You can place the, you can change the position of the symmetry. You can take mirror symmetry, or you can take radial symmetry as well. So if you want a radial symmetry, that can be accessed from here. People who have used ZBrush or something like that, you already know what a radial symmetry is. So you can take a radial symmetry as well. Flat surface is easier to understand. Anything like this, you can paint. So I hope these options are clear as of now. You can move the mirror manually by using the option beside the your symmetry settings. This gives you to the option to manipulate the mirror as well. So this again is a comes handy, particularly when there is a little bit of non-symmetry in your objects or something like that. It can come handy at that time. Now we've seen some paint options from here. Now paint properties. Like we can use different paint properties over here. So if I want to use a particular like alpha, so I can create my own alphas from here. I can use my if I've taken a brush, a default brush, so as to say, this is my default brush. So you can see it's using these specific alpha options and image inputs. I can change it as whenever I want, I can change this. So now I have taken these two triangles kind of stuff. So it can work accordingly. Now, if I want to stamp, if I want to create a stamp, don't use the pen pressure stuffs. And also there is an option over here called follow path. This has to be off. So then you can use the same brush options to be used as stamps. Now, as you see, the properties of paint right now is just painting color. You can paint at the same time. You can add some height and normals. If I turn on height and normals and increase or decrease the height option from here. So I have to keep the height option adjusted from here. And you can see it's adding some height to my paint. If I change the alpha, it'll again give me some different options. So right now I'm doing without stamp, but if I want to, and just using the brush as a stamp, but if I want to use it with flow and all, then that can be done as well. Now it will not work as a stamp only, but it can be used to create this kind of brush strokes and all. Now if you want the brush strokes to be following a proper direction and all, you should turn on the follow path. Is the spacing, and you can see it's actually following the path of the brush. If the follow path is off from here, it may create some issues. If it is on, it will follow the path exactly the way you want. So I hope the paint properties are clear, how it works. The entire stuff is much clear now. For example, if I want to reduce the height, if I want to stamp it in, so just reduce the height. Keep the height take the slider to the left, and it will stamp in the opposite. So if I want it higher, so increase the height value. If I want it to engrave inside, so keep the height value low. I hope it's clear till now. Any questions? Yes, absolutely. We have an option like lazy mouse. That is the distance option over here. If you have to turn on the distance option, and the more distance value you keep, the more the better it will work over here. Distance over here works exactly like lazy mouse. So that was basically some of the paint properties that we have seen. Now we'll also see a little bit of layer properties. If I'm using a fill layer, those properties also we need to see a little. So I'm removing this particular layers, and now I have got a green base. Now on top of this base, I'm adding one more layer, maybe something, a red color layer. Now, what I'm going to do as of right now is absolutely random, but this is how Substance Painter actually works. So what I'll do is, now if I need to mask this layer, how do I use a mask in Photoshop? So what I'll do is right click and add. Now there are multiple options for masking layers. Let's by default take a white mask. Now what white mask means is a mask has been applied, but this mask is totally white in color. So in Photoshop, if you take a layer mask which is white in color, that means that layer is entirely visible. So you need to paint in black to hide some part of the layer. That's exactly what we'll be doing over here. So I take this fill layer, and on top of that, if I want to delete the mask, just go over here and remove mask. But as of now, I'll just add a white mask. Right click. I cannot directly paint on it. If I want to paint on it, that won't be possible. So what we will do is we'll just take a brush now, and we can sorry, this was a mask layer, so painting is possible. So I'll just take this and we can, start painting with the brush. Now, as I paint with the brush, and maybe I take some grunge options as alpha. So I go to alpha, make some change over here. There are some grunge options available. You can type in. You can basically type in, I want to use some grunge as my, mask, as my alpha for the brush. I take this a grunge maybe and start, painting over here. So as I start painting, so what it is doing is it is revealing the layer beneath, just like we do in Photoshop. This part till now, we are doing exactly what we do in Photoshop. Right? Till now, this is exactly what we do in Photoshop. There's a reverse way of doing this. So if I take instead of a white mask, if I take a black mask, so what it will do is it will, hide the entire layer. Now I'll take a brush and change the brush color, and I'll start, painting in reverse. Yeah. Too much distance. So as I start painting, and you see the grayscale color, if I've taken a white mask, I have to paint with black. If I take a black mask, I have to paint with white. So you need to change the color accordingly. If you want to paint with black, to make it black. If you want to paint with white, paint with white. So I've taken a black mask now, and I start painting. So the layer beneath starts revealing. So far so good. This is the basic masking stuff that we do in Photoshop. But this is not what we do in Substance Painter. We don't need to do so much manual work in Substance Painter. Substance Painter is mostly about using procedurals and generators kind of stuff. The maximum stuff that you should be able to do, use automatic options or Substance Painter procedural options. So what I'll do now, right now, the last thing that we do today. So right click, and I'll take a black mask. So I've hidden the data of the red layer. Now, right click on the mask and add a generator. This is where Substance Painter, you can say the magic of Substance Painter begins. So I take a generator. Now I select the generator and go to the generator properties. So I go to the generator properties, click on it, and you have got multiple generators over here. So I'm going to take a simple one. I'm just going to take maybe dirt. So I take dirt, apply. Immediately what happens is the red layer is visible in those parts where dirt accumulates in a surface. Where from that data is coming? That data is, Substance Painter is calculating that data by using the texture maps that we had baked earlier. That is namely the ambient occlusion and curvature maps. So it has applied this dirt generator, which leaves the red color only in areas where ambient occlusion, which are basically the ambient occlusion areas, the areas which don't receive the light directly and so on. So that is exactly the area where we get the dirt accumulates and stuffs. Now I can control this from here, how much dirt I want, how much of this layer I want to be effective. I can control from by using the dirt level. It can be a bit randomized from here. You can invert the layer if you want. So if you want the layer to be inverted, you want the exact opposite result, you can do from there. You can control the dirt level from here. You can change the dirt contrast, whether you want to be very contrasting, very hard, or you want to kind of softly layer the layers and all. That you can do from here. How much amount of grunge you want to be there, how much grunginess you want to be there, that can again be controlled by using the grunge amount. The grunge scale, the size of the grunge can be controlled from here. Edges masking, how much masking you're going to use, you can control that. There are some other options like micro details. These are to be used later on. We'll see how it works later on. So this is how it actually works. Now, see, this is non-destructive. Now, instead of red color, if I want just a darker version of the green, that can be done again. I just change the color to a darker version of the green. And this particular fill layer, I need to be very rough. I don't need any kind of, specularity or reflections. Don't want any other properties as well. I don't need roughness or any kind of stuff here. Roughness I need. I don't need height or other informations. Just color and roughness. So this is giving me this sort of a look and feel. Now atop this, I also want a particular kind of details and surface details over this. So what I can do is go to take another layer, a fill layer. I can change the layer order. I'm putting it beneath. Now this layer, I don't want any kind of color or other information. Just need height and normal definitions, right? Mainly the height definitions. So keep the height on. Now I can add some procedural to the height over here. I just go over here and take any procedural map and it will apply a height. I can control the pattern tilings from here. But this is not the exact way of doing. The better way of doing is take a mask again, a black mask, and within this mask, in grayscale, you apply the particular kind of grunge or whatever we want to apply. We can apply it over here. I'm taking, for example, I'm taking this brick option. So just take an alpha. You can directly take a bitmap mask also. You can just take a bitmap mask and take something like maybe fibers. So it has added these fibers here. Now this layer I want mainly for, to use height options. So over here, let me boost up the height a little. So you can see the uh, fibers have been applied to this surface. Go to maps, get into the fill sections, and I can control the fiber scale from the properties of the fill. Now this this fiber is being applied according to the UV projection. If I change it to something called triplanar projection, you see the UVs are the fibers are being applied more, evenly. So sometimes you can do this as well. And there is some kind of, we have already got some kind of decent results popping in.